This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today, Tim Larkin. Second appearance on this show. His newest book, When Violence is the Answer. Learning how to do what it takes when your life is at stake. This is a serious work. There's no messing around here. When someone writes a book telling you exactly how to snap limbs, break bones, we're getting in deep. Now, don't think for a second that information is something you don't need to know. You actually do need to know it. In our modern, insane world, knowing some basics, especially for the women of our lives, mothers, wives, girlfriends, sisters, nieces, this stuff is terribly important. Tim brings a no-nonsense, no BS approach, extremely detailed. One of those books that you should just have on your shelf. No sales pitch for me. This is just one of those things. It's well past my expertise. And when you can pick up a book outside your realm and the sentences just wake you up every moment, that's serious stuff. That is the bomb. So let's jump right in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tim Larkin. For years, I spent a ton of time in San Diego, and one of my favorite pleasures in life is driving from San Diego to Las Vegas. I love every aspect of it. It's like this meditation for me. I've done it so many times. I especially love that feeling when you first see the city, and one of the first hotels that you see is Mandalay Bay. You can't miss it. You know, right when you come over the crest and you see it. And people might think this is funny when I say that. They might say, oh my gosh, whatever, Las Vegas. I'm telling you what, there, except for New York City, there's only one other place in the States where you can go and feel a pulse. Like literally, there's an energy in Las Vegas. And for those of you that have not gone, I implore you to go, to try and feel this, because I love it. I mean, Vegas is kitschy. I don't gamble, but I just like Vegas. I like something about it. I like how the people go there and everyone's excited. But unfortunately, terrible things have happened recently. And I can't think of a more interesting guest to have on this show to start to pick apart not necessarily what you might be able to give us as a lesson or insights about the recent Vegas shooting, but more big picture, more big picture. What can we extrapolate out from that experience and many other experiences? Listen, I love having you on. I appreciate you coming on again. I know it's a little bit of a somber setup, but I think there's a lot that we can continue to learn about violence from that situation, isn't there?
It's funny that this hit me very personally. I was literally packing that night. I was packing to go to Maui the next day. I was presenting all week at Tony Robbins' Platinum Partners. I'd given my tickets away to Route 91. My wife and I were going to go. We decided, okay, it's going to push it too much for us to go. My wife is in the back, in the back of our closet. My wife is not anybody that normally swears. She gets a call. All of a sudden, I hear, WTF, what's going on, which is highly unusual to come out of my wife's mouth. And then she runs and she turns on her Las Vegas Metro Police radio because my wife is a captain on the force. Michael, we literally heard it unfold over the radio. We heard everything. We heard the ending of the shooting. We heard the storm, the different police teams that got put together that stormed all the various hotels because they thought it was multiple shooters because of the confusion. We had no idea at that time it was going to personally affect us as far as friends and people that we knew. My wife lost an officer that night that she had put through the academy. 3 of my male friends were shot, and a friend's daughter was shot in the leg. Now, thankfully, all of them survived that. They are all currently recovering. But it hit us. The interesting part about this, from what I do, and what my thing is The feedback that I started getting, obviously I heard from people I hadn't heard from in a long time. Everybody was reaching out, making sure we were all okay. But what was really interesting was when some of the readers got back to me on the current book, and then people that have known me for years, trained with me and everything, and they said how much they appreciated the way I talk about the subject of violence, because they said immediately in the media, they said, wow, it's amazing how many people are focused on the wrong questions, when it comes to the tool of violence. And again, we grasp in a situation like this, the first thing that everybody wants to find out is the why. And it's a very natural response, but really, quite frankly, that's not something that's going to really help us to the point to where they're even going to study this guy's brain. There's bigger functions here. What was interesting was people said, hey, I was okay. I understood that in that particular situation, based on your teachings and everything that I know, I realized that's one of those situations that you talk about where there literally is nothing you can do other than obviously run, get out of there as fast as you can, hope for the best. Because I hope everybody understands that area that was there, it's literally a huge parking lot with nothing. Yeah, I mean, absolutely nothing there. So there's no place to have cover. There's literally nowhere to go. You just literally have to keep running and hope to God that the bullets don't follow you. So it was a horrific scene. My wife got called in. She ended up being the incident commander. She had the horrible duty of going around with a medical examiner, and she had to identify each and every body and then, shut down the scene. Her officers were there. It was just, this thing hit me extremely in a very, very personal sense. The subject is, what we're finding out is, with Nice, with San Bernardino, with Orlando, with the multiple Europe that are being hit, the thing that's intimidating everybody is that we're seeing a lot of relatively low-tech solo approaches to violence, meaning solo practitioners are just deciding to do things, and they're using something as simple and stupid as a truck. They're running out with just basic kitchen cutlery and attacking people. One terrorism expert said it the best, a guy that I followed for a long time. He said something that I've been saying for quite some time, for most of my career, that basically he goes, we're finally facing a weapon that we don't have any answers to. He goes, this is the one thing that none of us can predict, and we have no way of shutting it down. And that is, basically we are up against the human mind. We as humans, that everything that makes us great, also everything that makes us into some of the worst predators that there are, the most horrific, killers that is the human mind. And that's where it all starts. Human intent, the intent to do harm, is something that we can never shut down. We can, in the U.S., the first call was for gun control and everything. And I understand that. I totally understand that from a standpoint. But I tell people all the time, I travel worldwide. I travel in countries that literally have the strictest laws in the world when it comes to not only firearms, but anything that could be construed as a weapon. The example I tend to give all the time is, when I traveled through the Caribbean doing a tour, I was invited by a corporate group to give various lectures to their groups along the Caribbean. I found out that area per capita has more firearms than anywhere else in the world, more home invasions than anywhere else in the world, and the strictest, weapons laws that you could imagine. It's because the human mind to do harm will find a way if that's there, and we have to wrap our heads around that. We have to realize there are those people that are willing to do the unthinkable. It's shocking to us if we haven't looked at the subject, and that's why it's so worthwhile to look at the subject. Not to become a super ninja, not for anything ridiculous, but just so we don't have irrational fear, that we understand that this is a possibility, and that should anything like this happen, that we look at it the right way.
I think you're making a great point, and I think the real point here, where you're driving at, and frankly, I get a little frustrated about it. Why can't more people just imagine that there are evil people? There are evil people out there that don't have normal eyes. They're not looking at you normal. They're not attached to reality. And I'm somewhat surprised that is not, and that's kind of where you go a little bit here, is I'm surprised that we don't do that more as a society. I mean, why can't we imagine that some evil lunatic, maybe he's not even a lunatic, maybe he was just pure evil. Why can't we imagine a pure evil dude spent years and years and years planning as a high stakes gambler to go to his suite with a bunch of guns to kill people. Why is that not imaginable? He did it.
Exactly. That's the challenge. If you live in the U.S., if you're looking at the U.S. just as a country, you're talking about a country that's so powerful that in the past 10 years, at one time, we had 3 different war fronts going on, and it affected less than 2% of our population. There was no rationing. There was no effect on the economy because of the war, meaning it didn't affect the way we did things. It's unheard of in history that any country could be doing what we did on a regular basis. And there's just an unawareness. The reason it's so easy for us, especially in the Western countries, to be so shocked by this is because we've been so good at using the tool of violence for so long. We've outsourced it to our militaries and our police forces that compared to other parts of the world, we are relatively benign and relatively safe. And it gives the illusion that that's the way the world is. They don't realize that these long histories, when you have like the Pax Romana and the Pax Britannia, and now they're called the Pax Americana, these histories in the world where there's relative peace because of a superpower, that it's a very small part of history. And the history for all well and good purposes is really war is more of the norm than any of us would like to believe. And violence against other humans is more the norm than any of us would like to believe. We want to believe that the good in humans is really the majority, and that's not always the case. And it's actually a very healthy thing to understand that there are people that are capable of doing such horrible things. It actually allows you to live, conversely enough, it actually allows you to live a much more peaceful life if you understand the potentiality for violence and you understand that it may happen and that this is how it operates. That was a feedback I got from a lot of people. They said, it's a horrible situation, but I understand it. I don't have this irrational fear about it. I understand that this is a potential and that this could absolutely happen. And that alone is enough for people to kind of grasp on and something like that.
Tim, you brought up some of the other mass shootings of years past. I can think of Columbine, and you brought up Orlando, San Bernardino, now Las Vegas. I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, and this is one of the ones that is probably causing some people in the population to say, you know what? And I've heard this. I don't know if I want to be in the large groups anymore. And the only thing that I've heard come out of Vegas, which I thought was really kind of simple, I'm curious your perspective. And someone said quite simply, it's never firecrackers. What can we take away from these mass shootings? If you're in the mindset of it's never firecrackers, then the operative word that seems to come to my mind is hesitation. Now, look, these situations, there's no guarantee. And if these things happen and we're standing there might not be any escape. But walk me through some of your thinking. I know you've thought about these events because these are high in the media these days.
When it comes to active shooters, and I hate that term, it's really murderers using firearms. Active shooters make it sound like, it's almost like a video game in some way, shape, or form. This is people murdering people with firearms. And that's really what it is. It's that aspect of it. I do a drill in my trainings where I just do a very slow. I see a lot of these active shooter drills that you see out there are very popular, and it's always this chaos. It's always a bunch of people that are sitting in a room, and then simulated gunmen come in, usually with ski masks on, and they just scare the hell out of everybody, and everybody goes running, and there's really no lesson learned out of this. What I try to show people is just the base difference. And what I'll do is I'll do a count. I'll sit there and just go step by step. I'll say step, step, step. And I instruct the group that when the shooter comes through the door, they need to run away from the shooter. They need to, and they're not running. They can only go step as I say step, so everything's super slow-mo. And what I'll do is I'll have the shooter come through the door, and it's usually, my guys will just usually have a handgun, and I'll assume it's a Glock handgun with, say, 17 rounds in it. I will take people through 17 steps. Usually it's a fairly large room, and see how many people get out. And normally what happens is I have anywhere between 12 to 14 people that have been shot, simulated shot. I'll let those people know as the shooter comes. I then do the drill again. And I say, okay, this time when he comes through the door, instead of running away, you're stepping towards him. And when they step towards him, usually by the third step, the shooter is swarmed. The shooter is absolutely enveloped with bodies at that point. And less than 2 to 3 people, probably at the most, have been shot. The answer nobody wants in an active shooter situation is you need to swarm the shooter. Now, Israel learned this a long time ago because, of course, they had to live in this. They understood swarming the shooter. That precipitated the suicide bombers because active shooting wasn't working anymore for the terrorists. And so that was what propagated the suicide bombers that you have. The idea is, the answers that we get aren't favorable, but when you show people that in a logical step in a calm environment, you just show the logic of it. They see that. The other thing that people, unfortunately, in all of these shootings that I've heard is there were opportunities. Nobody recognized the opportunities when the shooter dropped down for a reload and he was reloading his magazines. That's the opportune time, obviously, to go after him. Nobody did because everybody because of their unfamiliarity with it, they just wanted to all get away. But that actually makes it easier for the shooter. But running away actually is easier. It gives him the space, gives him the distance, gives him the freedom to do what he wants to do in a situation like that.
The key word right there is the unfamiliarity.
Yes. Yeah. And I have no illusions going through these steps with people that it's going to change people. But what we have to do is we have to start there. We have to start educating on a wide basis. And people need to understand the realities of, okay, this is what happens in situations like this. What makes it work for this guy is exactly what you want to do. You want to run away, and that makes it easier for him to kill all of you and shoot all of you. And it's the exact opposite when you come in. Now, this is not the answer anybody wants to hear. But again, at least you understand, you've been shown on a logical level what works and what doesn't work. The education process is there. And that's where people sit there where what you're talking about, realizing, hey, this isn't fireworks. So now it's not fireworks. So now you have a plan. Now it's like, okay, I can't get to the exit. I can't, you quickly notice what you can do. And what's really interesting is the more you're schooled in using the tool of violence, to protect yourself, the more self-awareness that you have in every situation. When people get on, and it's not being paranoid, it's just understanding, okay, I'm in with this. I've decided to go to the movies tonight. Okay, I know where my chair is. I know where the closest exit is for me. I know it's going to take, it's 10 rows down. I know 10 chair tops that I'm going to have to touch before I can get to the exit. Just little things like that are things that can save your life in a situation. Just knowing, just being aware of what goes on. These are all very mundane, easy things to do. And people say, yeah, but they never do it.
When you bring this up, I can think, though, that it's a little easier, and as a guy who played sports when I was younger, it's a little easier, I think, for men who have played sports, this kind of situational awareness. And you are always sizing up everything, the room, the person, everything. You're always, I'm still in my late 40s and I still look at other men and I'm sizing him up and I'm saying, okay, if there's a problem with this, and you do it in a split second, like you're not being paranoid, you just do it. You just say, okay, if this guy causes a problem, how am I going to handle him? He's 50 pounds bigger or he's 25 pounds smaller. Okay, the guy's 25 pounds smaller, maybe he knows Muay Thai. I don't know, but I'm always sizing everything up.
Especially guys that had some sports training. It doesn't just mean sports. There are people that have done this. Anybody that's had to do some sort of a skill set that requires working on the fundamentals all the time, or setting up, even a painter. A painter has a ritual that they have to go through, even if they're painting a room. They understand how they have to prep the room. They understand how they have to prep all the paints and just all of that prep work that you have to do before you actually do what you were there to do. And that is, anybody that's been schooled in that has no problem coming into a room and just saying, okay, that's where the exits are. That's where the access is. That's where the fire extinguisher is. It's just normal stuff. It's not being paranoid. It's just realizing, like you said, you walk in, you got some unfamiliar males in there, and you realize, okay, if this guy happens to be a problem, do I have a plan? What would I do? Those are the type of things that tell your brain immediately, instead of saying, oh boy, that guy's so much bigger than me, so much stronger than me. You're telling your brain, hey, shut down. There's nothing you can do. Versus, oh, okay, wait a minute. That's where his knee is. That's where his throat is. That's where, you start focusing. What I tell people is the alpha predators understand this, that there's no benefit in focusing when it comes to your self-protection. There's no benefit on focusing on the differences of humans, meaning the fact that this guy's bigger, faster, stronger, younger, leaner, whatever. Predators focus on the similarities. We all have this weak spot in our bodies. We all have that weak spot. Oh, he has a neck like me. He has a knee like me. He has, they focus on what's achievable, and they know every one of those vulnerable areas in the human body is vulnerable for everybody. They go around looking at humans in a very similar fashion rather than the way most of us look at it. Like we look at the differences.
Tim, one of my favorite things in life, and as a fellow author and someone who looks at a lot of books, reads a lot of books, I love the first lines of books, especially ones that are really good. And I got to give you all the props for this one, because violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. Now that just is look, we've been kind of hinting at this in our conversation so far, but when violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. That opens up Pandora's box to the morality of it. I want you to go down that path some, because in my mind, and I go through the back of your book, and I got to tell people from the top here, we might miss some of the topics here, but in the rear of Tim's book, it's medical grade violence. Like, how do you snap limbs? Now, you might be saying to yourself, I don't want to know how to snap a limb. Tim, there's a lot of reasons we should all know, at least at some point in time of our life, to be reading that 30 minutes on snapping a limb. But let me get back to the opening of the book, though, before we dive in more. The morality of this. Speak to the morality of violence.
It's very hard for a sane socialite, like anybody that's out here listening to this saying, God, I'm so uncomfortable with the subject and I can't ever see myself doing that. That's a very healthy response, and I understand that response. And that's why the challenge for me in writing something like this and teaching almost 3 decades that I've been doing this. What I love about this is taking somebody who's very unfamiliar with the tool of violence and flipping it on them and showing them, hey, you're actually pretty good at this already. We're all hardwired to be able to be good as human beings, to be good at using the tool of violence. It's how we got here. What I have to do for you is provide you the right context. Because most likely every time you've seen anything having to do with violence or the use of it, it's either been a criminal showing it, or it's been some sort of a, kind of a thuggish martial arts teacher or combat sport practitioner who is showing potentially very good information in the absolute wrong context, usually in the context of some sort of a bar fight, some sort of antisocial aggression, something where you had choice. They're basically advocating that you choose to use violence, which is the absolute quickest way to get yourself involved with the legal system in a really bad manner. What I need to do is I need to sit there and take that statement, and that statement really is the crux of everything that I do, that right out of the gate, we say violence is rarely the answer. And everybody loves that part of the statement. Where everybody gets uncomfortable is where I come back. I say, but when it is the only answer, when it is the answer, it's the only answer. That's the part that the book explores.
People want to argue that second point. They'll go with you on the first point, but very smart, accomplished people, probably, I'm sure you know some, to this day, they don't want to accept that second part.
No, and they don't, because they want the world to be the way they want it to be. And I understand that. I understand that they want that. I've had people give me every reason why violence shouldn't be the answer. And then all I have to do is walk them through the situation where the situation where I say you would have to use the tool of violence is where you're absolutely devoid of choice. If you had an exit, you would have taken it. If you could talk your way out of it, you would have already been able to do that.
Give an example. Go down the path. So many people say, violence is evil. But look, violence can be used by the good guys too.
Well, I give a great example in the book that I think is just my hallmark for people to understand the difference. I talk about a young lawyer that was, he was a barrister that was attacked when in a park outside of London when he was going home at night. He got off the tube station in a relatively safe part of London, and he walked through, even though it was 11:30 at night, he walked through a park that was a pretty well-lit park and really had no level of crime to even speak of. He just happened to be followed that night by two criminals. And he looked like a good mark. And they came up to him. They threw him up against a tree. They threw knives. They demanded all of his goods. And he gave it to him. He gave his watch. He gave his wallet. He gave his briefcase. And I believe he had some other, I want to say either a bracelet or a necklace that was that he had that was of jewelry that he gave all of that. And they left. And everybody loves that part of the story because he did everything that the authorities tell him to do. Don't resist. Comply. Give them what they want. And they'll leave. And they did. The problem was they came back. And the second time they came back, it was a very different situation. Their heads were down, the knives were drawn, and they ran him down. They ran him down. He was heard screaming at them, why? I gave you everything. I gave you everything. They stabbed him over 8 times and killed him. And the reason being was that when they walked away with all of the things that they had just robbed from him, one said to the other, he saw our face. Probably not a good idea. And that's all they did. They just turned right around and then they went into an asocial mode. The first mode, any client coming to me that I want them to understand is in the first situation, we're talking about antisocial aggression. We're talking about an extremely unpleasant situation where literally a knife is at your neck, but they are talking to you. And there's the possibility in that scenario for you to use your social skills to talk your way out of a bad situation, which is what this individual did. But I want my clients to know at the second situation where the knives were drawn, the heads were down, there was no communication. The only thing that's going to work in that situation is going to be the tool of violence. You're going to have to do that. And this young barrister didn't understand that. There's another clip that I use, a video clip that I use of a prison situation. And there's a prisoner who just committed a heinous murder in there, but he's interviewed after, and they kind of ask him about why he did what he did. And he goes into kind of a little soliloquy about things. And then he says, I've been in prison a while. And he goes, I've seen guys not understand it's about to happen. And they keep on talking and they keep saying it. And he goes, and they get themselves stabbed up. They get themselves, he uses an expletive, effed off. It's a very inelegant way of saying, basically, I've seen guys not recognize it's gone asocial and they have no idea they're about to be attacked and killed. And that's not going to be me because I understand when that happens. I understand when there's no communication. I understand when people are about to attack. And that's what I try to drill into any client, that there's a huge difference between antisocial aggression, which is eminently avoidable, and you can use skill sets to de-escalate, and then the rare time when it's an asocial violent attack, where it's just purely you're facing imminent grievous bodily harm, you're devoid of choice, and if you don't respond using the tool of violence, you're basically being complicit in your own murder.
But here's the hard thing about that. The hard thing is, I'm thinking through my life, 40 plus years of life, I've never been faced with that asocial. That person is going to, I've never been faced with that situation where that person is going to stab me or that person is going to kill me. So preparing for that, preparing to see those eyes look at you that are completely asocial. He's tuned off. He's now an animal. To prepare for the animal look in a human being, extremely difficult before it happens.
If you're trained incorrectly. So say you're going through this. I mean, when people train with me and they train on the floor, if they train in an asocial environment, there's no communication, there's no music, there's no smiling, there's no human interaction really. It's just you basically putting injury on the human body and your partner is modeling it, which is exactly what the alpha predators do. It's the difference between in the animal kingdom. We've seen it all before. We've seen like 2 rams trying to knock each other off of each other's territory. It's very big, and they're knocking each other around. We've seen two lions, going at each other. They're not really trying to kill each other. They're not clawing each other. They're not biting each other, but they're just using aggressive, loud situations, to kind of run somebody off the territory, and unfortunately, we as human beings, we tend to think that's real violence. That's not real violence. When you then watch these predators, when they're actually hunting, they're going after, say, a gazelle, or they're going after something that they need to kill, they're amazingly quiet. They sit in there, they make absolutely zero noise, and when they pounce, they just come right at it with no communication whatsoever, and they go for it. And that's the same thing. We all inherently, we don't, because it hasn't happened to us, doesn't mean we don't recognize it. The problem is you have to have some sort of understanding, and it can be something just as little as changing your mindset, changing the way you look at the situation, how you start viewing, violence. Can radically change the way you approach things. You can actually really give yourself some amazing mental self-protection and detect asocial violence long before it's going to actually trigger. And that's probably been the greatest gift that I've given a lot of clients, is by, looking at my writings and my products, and, some of them coming and actually training with me. I get reports back saying that, hey, I was out, I got in this situation, all of a sudden, all these nonverbal cues are screaming at me. Something was definitely wrong. They were basically sensing that things were going asocial, and they were able to get themselves out of there before it happened. What happens to me with my client base, my client base that I say in the book, and the reason I write this, and I love doing podcasts like this, because I'm hoping to reach those people that haven't had violence that's affected their lives. But the people that actually come and train with me, 70% of them have had something already happen to them. They had some sort of an experience with violence. Only 30%.
You're after the fact.
And I can't undo the violence. I can't undo what already happened to them. What I can do is I give them a skill set to make sure that I minimize the chance of that ever happening again. But what I do in situations like this is, a lot of people are out there having behaviors right now that basically I equate to sleeping with your head on the railroad track. You're doing things out of convenience that are putting your life at risk, meaning you're taking that shortcut through the dodgy area of town because it's convenient, and you've done it at least 20 times in a row, and nothing's ever happened to you. Therefore, you think somehow, well, the train won't come tonight, I'm going to still keep my head on the railroad track and go to sleep. And everybody's shocked when the train finally comes. What I do is, through the education process of understanding how violence works, how it operates, and how you can actually, wield the tool of violence if you need that, what that tends to do to people is it tends to make them look at decisions they're currently making in their life, and they end up taking their head off the railroad track and making better decisions. Yes, it might cause some inconvenience. You might have to get up 20 minutes earlier because you can't go to use that shortcut anymore. You might have to avoid going to the ATM, after 8:30 at night because it's just not worth it statistically. There are some conveniences. You're going to have to be okay with the idea that what you think you should be able to do is not necessarily what you should do. Meaning, I've had women, well, I should be able to jog at night in my area, and I should be able to wear earbuds, and nobody should assault me. And that's absolutely true. That should be the case. But unfortunately, by doing that, you're depriving yourself of a key sensory situation. You're targeting yourself for predators as a really prime victim because, it's nighttime, and you're minimally dressed, and you're just an easy target. These are the things that, once you understand the tool of violence and what it would take for you to survive an act of violence, you don't want to bring that into your life if you don't have to. So you start making a lot better choices.
Tim, while we're there, since you brought it up, I think it's a great point, either for women listening or for all those guys with mothers, sisters, girlfriends, wives, etc. Women and earbuds. The floor is yours. Explain.
I won't even limit it to women. I've got a great training video that I use of an armed robbery on a bus in Seattle. Michael, you'd be shocked. This guy is actually, when you see him from the back of the camera, from the back of the bus, he's walking down. He robs no less than 3 people before he gets to the one guy that takes action. the three people are immersed. They have their ears, in earbuds, and their eyes are on their screens and they're on their iPhones or whatever they're looking at. And this guy robs all three of them. There's no communication. Nobody's talking to anybody. Nobody alerts anybody. There is a guy with a gun. He literally is just calmly walking up and down. He puts his gun in front of this other guy who has his earbuds on, has the screen, he's watching the screen. He notices it, gets shocked, and then he actually does a good move. He actually redirects the vector, so he knocks the gun off to the side and he charges the individual. So he basically closes distance on him, and it prevents this guy from being able to effectively use the gun. In his other hand, he's holding his phone. And you would think, fantastic. Now he's going to use the phone as a bludgeon and, attack this guy. No. He literally is taking his phone and he's trying to get it into his overcoat pocket, and he fails a couple of times. It takes him about 3 attempts to get it in while he's charging this guy with a gun. This is a guy who has a gun in his face, who could potentially be shot. And even though that's the case, these smartphones have literally taken over our brains to that his biggest concern is to make sure he gets it in his pocket before he uses his other arm to help protect himself. That's how much these things have taken over of us, not just the earbuds. We are giving up when we're looking at these screens and our ears. We are giving up two extremely important sensory systems. We're giving up our vision because we're myopic in looking at the screen, and we've given up our awareness of our hearing because we're using the earbuds, and it's just commonplace. What I try to do with people is, I get it. Nobody loves listening to audiobooks, podcasts, music more than me. I love it, especially when I'm working out, when I'm doing things. But I have to be aware if I'm going to do something outside, if I'm walking, say I'm doing one of my outside workouts or something like that, I just can't do that. I can't cut off a sensory system. It's just too valuable to me. It's just one of those things that's the first thing a predator will look for, especially if he understands that you're completely immersed in your technology and just oblivious of your surroundings. It's just the easiest way to put yourself in as a great potential victim.
Let me move this to weakness. I'm sure some people are listening and they're saying to themselves, oh man, what happens if I have to deal with violence and it's a guy that has Tim's experience, perhaps Tim's fitness, basically, just a kind of an avenger, a real life avenger, a guy that has the physicality to possibly, break my elbow in a second or, shoot me faster than I can think. So I'm now faced with Tim. You've got a great story in the book, and I would love for you to elaborate, explain it. You, as a young man, training to be a SEAL, indestructible. I love the setup. Basically, you're just of the mindset where it's like, I am badass. And you have actually made that an actuality. You are. But something very small that exists on all of us today, and there's other weaknesses, but something very small unexpectedly took you out.
That was this turning point for me because my whole world up until that point was bigger, faster, stronger. To give the truncated version of that, basically I was a Navy brat. My dad was an officer in the Navy. One of his last commands was in Coronado, California. He had a ship over across the way on 32nd Street, but we lived in Navy housing in Coronado, California. The back fence that I had to my house literally looked across the highway. And on the other side of the highway was basic underwater demolition school and the huge obstacle course that SEALs run, that's there. That's what I grew up with, and I got introduced at a time where the SEALs hardly anybody knew about them back then. As a young kid, I got introduced to this amazing group of guys that got to do this. I couldn't even believe this is a real job, what these guys got to do. Got to know them intimately, couldn't believe it, and just made my decision right then and there. I'm gonna do this. This is what I'm gonna do. And so I made it, my practice. I started taking cold showers at 13. I started prepping. I understood these guys told me exactly what I had to learn. I knew every evolution of training. I knew how to get through all that stuff. Sure enough, went all the way through college. I was a monster. This was it. I was completely focused on this. Got into training. I killed it in training. My team won Hell Week. It's a 5-day evolution where we were the number one boat crew. They let you have a half day early off from winning all the events. I was just through it. And I let everybody know it. I let everybody know that I was a badass, that I was the guy. And I had the pick of the SEAL team that I wanted to go to. I was there. I had a couple of weeks left of training, went for a no big deal dive, a couple of days out. I was a little bit congested. And so I forced myself to do the dive because I didn't want to have to redo it. So I do it. Like you said, I'm underwater, and just like above the wave, above on the surface you have waves, but underneath you can have pressure waves too of water. And as I'm focused trying to tie down these explosives that they're having us do, I get hit on the side of my ear with one of these waves, just kind of like a pressure wave. Imagine like you're underwater and it's almost like you're forcing water towards yourself, towards your ear, like that. And it hit me perfect. Here I was congested, had a little bit of pressure in my ears already. Boom, burst my eardrum, goes just a shard of cold water goes right up in the middle of my head and empties out my semicircular canals. And all of a sudden I lose all sensation of balance. I go into vertigo. I'm underwater and I have no idea which way is up. The only way I got up there was by pulling myself up the anchor line to the boat above me. And they said when I hit the surface that my head was just, flapping uncontrollably, blood coming out of my ears, the whole scenario. Literally in seconds, my SEAL career was done. That was it. They looked at my ears. The doc looked at my ears when I got back to the thing, but the corpsmen that were on the boat with me, they just basically, I could tell by the way they were looking at each other. They knew I was done. They just didn't want to tell me. I was shocked. Here I was, like I had been hit. I had been hurt. I had been knocked down. I had, twisted things. Everything. Nothing had ever, I'd never had basically my body betray me before. And this was the first time, my first introduction at, 21 to injury in the human body where I couldn't will my way through it. I was completely susceptible to it. And it really was the changing point in everything to where I learned that not just the semicircular canals, but there's lots of areas in the human body that no matter what our training is, no matter what we can do, we cannot protect ourselves from injury. They're highly vulnerable. And if you know how to exploit them, this is like the Rosetta Stone to self-protection because it bypasses bigger, faster, and stronger. And I had firsthand experience of this happening to me. It was crazy, and then the story goes on to where I end up doing what I'm doing through a series of events that never should have happened. I mean, it made no logical sense. I was just incredibly fortunate. That was the thing that I want everybody to understand, that what I'm proposing is not what they're probably thinking. They're probably thinking about this epic contest against somebody who's bigger, faster, and stronger, and they're almost imagining like being thrown into the octagon with an incredibly good fighter.
Yeah, gladiator, right?
Yeah. And that's not the way this happens. What happens is a predator gives you an opportunity because they don't feel you're a threat. They put a vulnerable part of their body close enough to you, and you know how to exploit it. And my clients that unfortunately have had to use this information have been able to exploit one area of their human body, and it changed everything in their favor. Meaning the guy went from being bigger, faster, and stronger to if they hit him and say in the throat and the cartilage, they crush his cartilage, and all of a sudden he's asphyxiating. He can't breathe at that point. And so that's his whole focus. And no matter what he wishes to do, he is too focused on the fact that he can't draw air anymore, that, he's vulnerable. And then the client was able to put on 2 more injuries to the individual until the guy was non-functional. Another client was able to exploit the top of a foot, and was able to break the top of the foot on somebody who had a gun to his head. And he was able to then use the car door that he was next to then snap the guy's knee, and the guy passed out. And this is all straightforward information because people understood basic injury to the human body. The data all comes from sports injury data, because sports injury data is where humans collide with humans or humans collide with a planet. And you and I can replicate those types of forces. That's why it's worthwhile to look there. And the same areas of the human body come over and over. There's approximately 70 areas of the human body that show up in the injury data. Some of those 70 target areas that we're talking about have, more than one, meaning they have bilateral targets. Like if you say, if you have the eye, you have 2 eyes. If you have the ear, you have 2 ears. But you only count the target once, but there's 2 opportunities there. But throughout the body, and what you find really soon is that you stop looking, like I said earlier, you stop looking at the differences in the person across from you, and you start looking at the similarities, and you understand how to exploit those similarities. And that's where the confidence comes through the roof. Because I walk out the door to I'm at my training center right now in my little studio that I have for stuff like this. And if I walk out the door and I'm unaware and I catch a pipe to the back of the head, my 25 years of doing this, being a master close combat instructor and all those accolades and everything goes right out the window. I drop just like everybody else. None of us have immunity to injury. But the good part about that is neither does the other guy. And if we know how to exploit that, the most unlikely people in the world have been able to save their lives against bigger, faster, and stronger people because they understood injury to the human body.
I want to pick your mind for something practical. Now, look, this is not meant to cover the entirety of your work, but for people listening, women, men with women in their life, basically all of us. And I'm thinking about the Hollywood situation that's been all the rage in the news. Multiple Hollywood producers, big fat slob turds, basically raping young women, okay, at a huge weight differential. What described almost sounds like perhaps some men that are 300 pounds and the women might be 115 or 120 pounds. It's really difficult to talk to women, at least from my perspective, to say, what chance do I have? What chance do I have? The reason I brought up your SEAL injury was because to hopefully kind of get people thinking, hold on, and we've all got these weak spots. So from a practical standpoint, the woman is faced with the situation of like, okay, this beast of a pig is going to rape me. Tim, the floor is yours. Where does she start? If she doesn't get a chance to read When Violence is the Answer, what's her best first move?
I'll give you a story that I tell in the book. I had one of the most unlikely women in the world go through my training. Her dad made her go through the training. It was on a cruise that I was doing with this group. It's kind of a corporate group, but they were more like presidents of corporations, and they're all together. A lot of them had daughters that were going, getting ready for college age. And so I did a thing. They asked me, hey, do a thing with dads and their daughters to teach them self-protection. I said, yeah. Well, most of the girls came kicking and screaming because, of course, we're on this amazing cruise ship and we're in the Baltics, and it's just every port is better than the next. It's there. So the last thing they want to do is not be able to sun. They want to be holed up in a room with me and a bunch of the dads and learning self-protection, So, but we got through it. The one of the girls that was in there, she literally was like Reese Witherspoon and Legally Blonde. I mean, she was that girl. Very smart and everything, but very much an LA chickie. Really just could not believe she was being forced to do this stuff. So I didn't think anything of it. I went through. She did everything I asked her to do, and I'm training in New York a couple of years later, and here comes this girl and she's got her 3 sisters behind her, and they're all about the age she was. They're all right. She had twin sisters, and then she had another younger sister, but they were all in their late teens, and she was in her early 20s. And she came up to me. She goes, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I remember you." I said, "How you doing? How's your dad?" And she goes, "Oh, Dad didn't tell you." And I said, "What?" And she proceeds to tell me that she goes her freshman year at college, second semester. She wakes up one night. She had a bed where it was like a college bed, where it's kind of a loft bed, and underneath the bed is the desk that a lot of the kids have. She wakes up to a guy on her. She's probably about 110 pounds. This guy's like 235, and she just wakes up to this guy on top of her, and that's it. And she said, the first thing that came through my mind was, he's not close enough, because we had put them in a lot of scenarios where, she understood that if she was going to go after something on his body, she had to make damn sure he was close enough, because she realized that might be the only chance that she has. And she said, it was like you were in my ear. She said he did exactly what you said. He had to adjust to try to get the sheet down. And when he did that, he brought his head close to me, and I knew I could get his eye. And she had learned how to, wrap her arm around the back of his neck, because he's going to pull away, and how to jam her thumb and, blind him. And that's exactly what she did. Now, she hadn't had any training since. She just had the couple of hours that we had given over a day or two. But it came back to her because it was very understandable, because she understood, by focusing on the similarities in human bodies, she knew that was an opportunity for her. So she does it, and sure enough, the guy violently pulls back, as his eye is being attacked, and she's holding on to him, literally takes her off the bed. So they go off the bed and they fall towards the floor. As they fall to the floor, her hand comes out of his eye, and her forearm just ends up like right under his throat. And as they hit, he hits first, and then she falls on top of him. She feels her whole forearm. She wasn't really trying to do this, but she feels her whole forearm crush into his throat. And she can feel him give at that point. She can feel that all of his muscles kind of release. Because she understood that she definitely cracked his cartilage. And she just remembers getting up and running out her door, screaming down the hallway. By the time that the resident agent got there and the security got there, she had ended up killing this guy. He asphyxiated and died. They found out later on that this guy had been stalking them for at least 6 to 7 weeks. He watched their patterns. He understood that her roommate, basically on certain nights of the week, would always spend the night at the boyfriend's place, and these guys always left their windows open on the first floor. He just knew he could get in there, and he targeted her for that. Now, he had hit other campuses. He had been doing this for approximately six years. He was a serial rapist. The reason she was able to do something, if we put both of those people in the ring and said go, there's no way it would have turned out the way it turned out. But because she understood injury to the human body, and because she understood also to stay calm, and this is with very little training, so you can't say this is a highly trained individual. And this was years after the training that she did this. She was able to, save her own life. To me, those are the types of stories that are there, because what I'm training people in is principles, not techniques. She understood the principle of injury to the human body, and I had given her enough different sight pictures of various parts of the body. Because I had no idea. I couldn't have predicted that's the way she was going to find herself in the predicament she was going to find herself in. I didn't know if it would be that. But what was great is the brain searches for the most relevant information during that time. And that's what she said. She said, it was like, I was right back there. You're coaching us through this. I heard everything you said. That was a physical attack that she had to deal with. What you're talking about, and I'm just going to put this caveat in, because I did the book, my other book that I did was Survive the Unthinkable, and that was purely about women's self-protection. The other thing that has to come there, a lot of what happened with the Hollywood situation, there's a lot of different dynamics that are involved in that. You've got these powerful men who control whether or not you're going to be up on the silver screen. There's this compliance that people buy into. Things get out of hand, and it's there. And so oftentimes women will put themselves in a situation that if it was just a normal interaction with a male and he was acting this way early on, they would have got themselves out of there. But the reason they let it go, and the reason they allowed their guard to get down, is because of what it represents to them in their career potential. It's one of these horrific things that women have to deal with. It's not as easy in a situation like that to just give them the physical thing. What my client faced, and what other clients that I've had, female clients face, when it truly is an unfamiliar male doing it, it's extremely easy for them to take action if they have training. But it's when you have some sort of a work or social relationship with a predator, that they use that to exploit your self-protection, your natural self-protection needs. And that's just one of these really uncomfortable areas that we have to look at. And human predators of that, sexual predators, child predators, they're extremely good at manipulating the situation so that you're in this uncomfortable space where you allow yourself to be basically vulnerable.
It's definitely, there's a distinction there for sure. I guess in the situation with the Hollywood producers, for the women that have actually accused of rape, I guess there's that moment in time you say to yourself, I try to put myself in the woman's shoes, and can't imagine this is going to happen. This is a famous Hollywood producer who then is all of a sudden raping her. I guess the choice at that moment in time is, as you kind of say right there, do I allow this to happen, or do I say, gosh, all bets are off. I don't care about the career anymore. I'm going to injure this jackass who is raping me. It's a messy situation that women have to deal with, because let's face it, you and I've never had to deal with the situation where I think that woman might sexually assault me. It's not something that men generally deal with.
No, it's not. And the only time that really happens is really a prison type situation for men. It's a very rare situation. What you have to understand also is that a lot of these women, this is the first time, when they get in a situation like this is the first time they've allowed themselves to be put in a situation like this, because they're thinking about their career, or they're thinking about where they want to go, and they're mistakenly thinking that this individual is there to help them.
An honest, reputable broker, and they're not.
Yeah, and not what's actually going on. And by the time they figure it out, it's just like my other clients that get caught in socially with a predator, not realizing the predator's just setting them up, taking them from one uncomfortable spot to the next uncomfortable spot, and then realizing, when it's too late, that they've ignored all of the nonverbal warnings, and that now they find themselves in this situation. A lot of them also have nothing in the toolbox. They wouldn't know what to do. And they're under the illusion that this is where a lot of people they're under the illusion that I can't hurt him. He's too big. He's too strong. Their women have been told, literally, there's a pamphlet that the Air Force was putting out to women saying that sometimes it's better just to comply rather than fight back, because oftentimes when women fight back, they end up getting murdered. Whereas if you just let it happen, there's a good chance that you'll live, which is absolute crap. I mean, that's not true at all. But there's this weird, women get this horrible information when it comes to, protecting themselves. And they're also told they're second-class citizens when they protect themselves, that they're not as capable as men. And that's absolutely untrue. I just told you that if we focus on the similarities in all humans, it's all humans. It doesn't, if the thumb to the eye, the recipient of that doesn't ask whether it's an XY chromosome or an XX chromosome, that's coming through. It's the thumb to the eye. And just like all these vulnerable areas of the human body, women are extremely good at learning how to protect themselves, and they actually learn it much faster than men, because they don't have, their relationship to violence is, if hands are being put on them, it's the real thing. Whereas men, we have this, we socially communicate at times with violence. We do locker room type violence. We knock each other around. We sometimes, we have to navigate, hey, is this intermale aggression, or is this the real thing? Women never have to think that. Women don't try to muscle things. When I teach women, they do pure technique when they're doing it. They understand if I show them how to use their body dynamics and how to use all of their body weight into a shot, they naturally know how to do that, because they don't try to use strength. I found women to be highly capable. The hard thing with the women is mentally preparing them and getting them to understand when it would ever be appropriate. And that's why you have to show it in the right context. You show violence in the wrong context, and people, rightfully so, look at it and say, that's criminal. If I do anything like that, I'm going to end up in jail. Therefore, I'm going to dismiss all of this. Whereas there might have been some good information shown in the wrong context. I say in the book, unfortunately, the best information when it comes to your own self-protection comes from the worst parts of society. And the reason being is because, especially when you look at the prisons, where I've had to look a lot of my information, they can't afford to get it wrong. Violence for them is currency. And therefore, when they look at the tool of violence, they have to look at it from a results-oriented standpoint. Because that's how they derive all of their power. All of their success is from, the successful threat of, and the actual use of violence in order to get what they need. It's just a very, very utilitarian look at the tool. And so you can learn an awful lot of good information for your own self-protection from a place where you thought it would only be criminal, and the use of it would only be criminal. You can't throw the baby away with bathwater.
One last thought that I have, and you hinted at it, brought it up earlier in the conversation, but I want to just say it very clearly. I really like this way you kind of express this throughout the book. But essentially, what you're telling us is knowing how to tear people apart, literally, is peace of mind. And that is counterintuitive on first blush. To me, I kind of hear it, it's very stoic in a way. It's very, it's calming to me. I kind of like, okay, what's the landscape? Where are the actors? Who are the actors? How can I survive? Yeah, that might mean I might have to tear somebody apart. But once you know that, you kind of take a breath in, take a breath out. Okay, calm down. I know what the situation is. I'm prepared. This is all about preparation.
The people I know that are in society, not the prison gang members or anything like that, but those that participate in society, it's those that are the most highly trained in the use of lethal force, justified lethal force, that are really the most peaceful, calm people that I know, and the least likely to ever willingly involve themselves in anything that could end up in violence, meaning they go out of their way to avoid situations that would ever force them to have to flip the coin. And what I mean by flipping the coin is, when you really understand violence, you understand that every time, until the first injury happens, it's a 50-50 endeavor, meaning either one of us could end up on the wrong side of violence, depending on that. And why would you want to flip that coin if you didn't have to? Therefore, you're gonna act. I mean, I tell everybody that I go through life. I say it in the book, and people mistake what I'm saying. But I treat everybody I meet like there's six people that I don't know. If I meet somebody for the first time, I'm going to treat that person essentially like they're 6 seconds away from a shooting spree. And I don't want to be the one to trigger it. And so I'm going to be very engaging. I'm going to make sure that, I'm not going to try to intimidate or threaten or throw off anything that could cause somebody to react negatively. I'm going to go out of my way to be polite. I'm going to go out of my way to be generous and in the way I am, because it costs me nothing to be that way. And there's no reason to trigger that, because I know nothing about the person in front of me. I don't know what they really are. I don't know what their worldview is at. I don't know their history. Therefore, I'm gonna make sure that the interaction that they have with me doesn't give them any reason to trigger anything.
You're minimizing yourself as a target in probably the easiest way possible.
Yeah, and I want it to be a total surprise if I have to use any of my training. I love it when people meet me and they go, "Oh my God, I was expecting you're gonna, I have friends that introduce me. Oh, this is Tim. He'll teach you how to kill with a finger or something." And of course, that kills any sort of social night, right there. Nobody wants to talk to that guy. And so people will meet me and they're like, "Oh my God, you're different than I exposed. You're not one of these chest thumping self-defense guys or anything. You're easy to talk to, blah, blah, blah." And then there are those that I'll meet somebody and at first they'll expect me to be, that tough guy, that badass. And when I'm not, I love it when those guys then think it's okay to start kind of, giving me a hard time or trying to joke with me or do things that they'd never do with anybody normally, if they were worried. And that's when I know I have them. That's when I know, oh, this is working great, because this guy is completely let his guard down. Should I ever need to do anything, this is going to be easy for me to use the tool of violence, because this individual is making all the wrong assumptions. People would hear that, they go, "Oh, wow, it's a really harsh way to go through life." And actually it's not, because you get to enjoy a lot of things. I don't worry about it. What I equate it to for most people is it's the idea of why we swim. Imagine if you're at a party and you don't know how to swim, and they have a large pool out where the party's going on. That's going to be a worry for people. They want to make sure they're not positioned in a way where they might fall in the pool or anything where they're there. That could be a concern. Or if you're out in a boat and you're going to be very concerned about falling off into the boat. It's going to be something you're aware of. Whereas if you know how to swim, you're not worried about it. You're like, okay, well, I know how to swim. I know what I would do if I fell in the pool or if I fell overboard. But until then, I'm not going to worry about any of those things. I'm going to actually have a great life. It just takes away from that. And if you understand how violence works, you understand the potentiality for it, you understand that there are people out there that just have no problem doing it to get whatever they want. And when you make peace with that, you end up, like you said, this counterintuitive living a much more peaceful, much more satisfying life, because you don't have this irrational fear.
Before you tell the audience where they can go to check out more on you, I want to read something really quick from the book I'm holding in my hands. Very nice looking book. This is page 246, The 6 Base Leverages. I want people to understand that even though we might sound a little philosophical today, This is almost like medical textbook in a way, in the rear, where you really get into the detail. And I just love this line here so people have some perspective. All joints break the same way, by moving past the pathological limit and tearing the tissues that hold the joint together. Then you go into the 6-space leverages and showing with pictures how one can save their life. I just wanted to kind of put that perspective out there because we really haven't gone down that level of literally the medical thinking here, the physiological thinking, how the body is put together and how you, just a regular guy, regular woman, can tear that body apart. So I really want people to understand that level of detail is in here as well. Tim, where can we send people to check you out? The book, Amazon, all the fun bookstores, the bookstores that are left. Where can we send people to check you out?
Well, I'll tell you the best place, Michael, especially for your people. I've done something that I did in the pre-sale process when I launched it out to my people first, and I'm extending it, especially when I do interviews like this. I'd love to extend it to your audience. If they go to the website, whenviolenceistheanswer.com, the name of the book, just whenviolenceistheanswer.com. All they got to do is they buy it on Amazon or wherever they buy it. If they just go back, just, send us, the proof of copy and just their email address, they'll be enrolled. I'm currently on module 4 of a 10 module video that I'm providing free of charge, where I go in depth on each chapter. So there are 10 chapters, and I give 10 video modules on each chapter, because I had a couple of thousand pages of research going into this book, and so I wasn't able to put everything into it. So I can go in depth on each chapter and really give some, multimedia perspective of things. And it's really been helping people that I've got almost 10,000 people in the program right now, and they're just material. And it's my thank you to people, because, this is a difficult subject. And if they're good enough to support me and buy the book, then I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that they not only get the information in the book, but they go above and beyond, and they get a lot more additional information that they can share and use. So that would be, if they really want to optimize, if they're really thinking of buying the book, that would be the best way for them to do it to get the most value.
Tim, I hope you come back on when the next book comes, because now that you've done several, I'm sure you can't stop. I know the feeling.
Well, I can't thank you enough for having me back on with your people. And please, if you get any questions or anything, I'll be more than happy to answer them for any of your clients.
Tim, great stuff as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take, along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.